Common Good Podcast. It's Friday, July 2nd. And by the way, in there was an imagination, Paul Wallace, astrophysicist, where the Independence Day was going to be today, July 2nd. Do you know that whole history story that July
I do
2nd
not.
was?
I do not.
Apparently, they were going to sign the Declaration of Independence on the 2nd, and then something happened. And maybe someone in the chat can remind us of what it was that happened. But somehow something happened, and it got moved to July 4th, that the sort of chosen day for the big "we will now declare our independence" was meant to be today. But like a lot of good plans, it got moved off to other times and other places. So happy July 2nd to you all. It's a Friday, which means we get to talk with astrophysicist Paul Wallace about all kinds of things, sciency and good and up in the sky. Paul, how's the summer life for you?
Summer life's been really good so far.
Okay.
And man, I needed it, like many of us did. Many of us in the teaching professions did. So I spent about half of June up in Michigan with my wife. We had our 30th anniversary. Spent a night in Detroit. How about that, Detroit, for your anniversary? Isn't that romantic?
Well, a guy knows how to do it. Did you get all Motown up there? Did you?
We went to a jazz club.
Okay.
We went to a jazz club called Cliff Bells, and it was phenomenal.
Are you a jazz aficionado?
Not an aficionado, but I just love the way it sounds.
Yeah. Did you then make your way up? Because I think you mentioned this a few weeks back that you were going to go all the way up to like the Canadian border and Mackinac.
No, we didn't go that far, but we did see Canada, of course, from Detroit. But we went up to a little town called Traverse City. We stayed on the Traverse Bay for a few days. Then we went up to Mackinac Island and hung out with an extreme lack of cars.
It is
lots
quite
of
lovely.
Hiking, and it is. It was lovely. And, you got lakes up there. They ain't the same as the lakes down here. I can tell you that.
They have their own look, especially that big one, that big Lake Michigan, Lake Superior. Those things are oceans. I know you're not a geologist, but boy, at some point to talk about how those lakes get made. And every time I'm up there and you're looking at those sand dunes.
That's where we went. We went to Sleeping Bear, Dunes, National Lakeshore. We spent 3 days hiking there.
That blows your mind, doesn't it? Like, where did all this sand come from?
It's crazy. And we learned some geology. I'm not a geologist, but I'm fascinated by it. Absolutely.
Okay, what did you learn?
Just that basically, it was scraped out by glaciers and so forth. And details elude me at this point, but it's just the landscape it's like surreal.
It really is surreal. And look, I mean, I believe all science. End of story. But that whole bit about like all that sand just got shoved there by a glacier feels still a little confusing to me.
Like somebody's making
this
up.
From where did the sand come from? It got all pushed there, and how did it get pushed into little piles like that? Like,
right?
When I see little piles in my backyard on my patio, and the ants put the little piles there. When I'm pushing around with a broom. Gets all spread out. So there's just so many questions I have about this planet and like why are things the way that they are. And I'm willing to take all the answers that the people who know more about this than I do. But boy, there's still a lot of lingering questions about how did all this stuff get there, especially those big lakes and all those dunes, and because those things are mountainous. They are, and just go on and on and on and on. Yeah,
we spent a lot of time climbing them. It's not easy to climb a sand dune, turns out.
No, you're like, I should have been working on my gluteus maximus muscles.
Stairmaster,
yeah. Did you get into a dune buggy? Did you find your way into one of those? Yeah,
did not.
Up there,
did not. We stayed low tech. We just hiked.
Yeah,
and biked. We biked on the island a lot.
Bicycled.
Yeah, not on dunes, no, but around Mackinac Island. Yeah, we biked a lot.
Did you feel like you were getting your legs ready to bike somewhere between San Diego and St. Augustine, Florida?
I did, Doug. I actually told Elizabeth about it as we were, and not while we were on bikes, but during the trip on the island, we talked. I told Elizabeth about that. Yeah, I told my son too. He's a triathlete, so he bikes a lot.
Okay.
So he's sort of pumped up about it. He's going to try to get down too.
Well, great. Well, anytime between September 10th and November 14th, we'll be somewhere between San Diego and St. Augustine, Florida, telling the story of
somewhere it really narrows
what's
it
happening
down.
along the border. So, you got a date, you got a general range. That feels like enough data for someone to kind of find us. And if that doesn't work for you, people can go to wethepeopleride.org and find all that, or vocommongood.com also has all of it. Your son is a triathlete, meaning he has done many a triathlon, or
no,
is he
he's
like
done
me
one.
That I've done one. Okay,
he's done one and is thirsty for more. He's about to purchase his own bike, and he's getting deeper and deeper into it. He's going to do like he did. I don't know what it's called, but he didn't do an Olympic scale one. But the next one he does is going to be, sprint. Right, the one he's going to do in early August is going to be Olympic scale. The standard.
Well, 2 weeks ago, I just did my own first time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I tried one other, and it was called off due to a storm right at the start of the swim. So I was, felt like I was a triathlete because I had signed up for one and was standing on the shore with my wetsuit on. I had overcome all my panicky attacks about swimming. And my new joke is when people say, like, wow, that's a big deal. Because I used to be a runner. Now I have a hip thing. And so I like to run really long ways, like 50 miles, 100 miles.
Yeah, I remember that about you.
This kind of nutty stuff. And I said, triathlons are hard, but, 1/3 of it you're sitting down and the other third of it you're laying down. So it's, it's not quite as hard as running because sitting down and laying down. But boy, the swimming and biking is a real deal. Well,
especially on open water swimming is different than pool swimming.
That's the thing, and for me, it's lakes. Like I can swim in the ocean, but and I live in the land of 10,000 lakes here in Minneapolis.
You do,
and we like to remind people there's actually closer to 15,000. We just don't like to brag, so we call it the land of 10,000 lakes.
Right, it's unseemly.
There are lakes everywhere. And so it's a little unfortunate that my panic attacks are about swimming in lakes. I did Google that. I had a panic attack the Tuesday before this race I was going to do. I hadn't done open water swimming in a couple of years for a whole lot of reasons. I'm like signed up for this triathlon, and I'm swimming in a pool is fine. So I went out to a lake to do a practice swim, and it did not go well. I couldn't make it 5 minutes, and a friend was with me in a little kayak, fortunately, because I just went into full panic mode. And I'm in a wetsuit. Like you literally cannot go down deep in a wetsuit. They're designed to make you float. So I wasn't panicky. I was going to sink. I wasn't literally sinking. I was holding on to a kayak or in a wetsuit, but I was having this panicky thing. So
how long did it last? Does it last as long as you're in the water, or did you?
It did for me that time. So I finally, we tried it for about 20 minutes, and I finally just said, I just have to get out. And so then I came home, and like a lot of people, when you're in a deep level of distress and you don't know what's happening in the world, you open up YouTube and type in panic attacks while swimming in a lake, and lo and behold, there's lots of videos of triathletes saying like, this is really common. Don't get down on yourself. This happens to a lot of us. One woman said she was a pre-Olympic, like Olympic qualifying swimmer, pool swimmer, and she said, but I get into a lake or an ocean and I just freak out. Like I've swam my whole life. It was so helpful. Is
it just like a form of agoraphobia or something? It's like just the fear of the openness of it all, just the limitlessness of it.
Well, this is what even the people on the videos and I was trying to figure out. I've concluded that like anxiety, which is what it feels like, a panic attack, anxiety attack, it's not rooted in circumstance and fact, right? It's coming from somewhere else. Like there were all kinds of things I could say, like this is actually less deep than the pool. I mean, I was in water that I could stand up in.
You were really?
Yeah, I mean, at the point that I'm having this,
Yeah.
And so it was two things. One, let's just go on to my therapy session here. So it was two things I realized. And one of them was, hey, you may have your wetsuit on in such a way that it's riding too low. So they say, because it starts to pull on your throat and kind of lock down your chest. So you have to and because I'm very inexperienced at this, I've only worn a wetsuit half a dozen times. You have to pull the wetsuit way, way up into your crotch and midsection so that your chest is free to move. Because as soon as you lay down in that water, the suit kind of starts to pull back toward your feet and starts to compress your chest. So that was huge, right? Thinking, oh, it's not only the thoughts going through my head, but it's also this physical thing that's happening. It was
maybe too subtle for you to realize consciously.
Yes. And I did feel like I couldn't breathe and was choking. It turns out, I couldn't breathe and might have been choking from that. But then they also just said, hey, here's another set of things that you do. And you get on your back and you look up and so then the next day I tried it again, in a lake and went out there and fixed the wetsuit. And that kind of helped a lot. And I was able to go for about a half an hour, longer than the time I'd be in my little sprint swim. And then I did it on the day and had a couple of little episodes out there. Because now there's people kicking around and like you're swimming in a group with people that are in a hurry, It's the thing about triathlons and races. Everybody's in a big hurry. I'm just trying not to have a panic attack out here. Can everybody settle down for a second?
Your definition of success is different.
Yeah. But I actually found that being in the tumult of it all, which is hard for some people because people are splashing you and the wind's blowing in your face and all this, actually really helped me in my panic attacks, feeling someone else bump up against me and someone's kicking hits on my shoulder. Like it felt very grounding, while you're out in the lake. And now, now I'm out there deep. So it's a curious thing that it's those thoughts that are in your head that are the parts that really get to you. It's not just the surrounding.
Right.
It's those and they're very real physical experiences, right? Like it's not like placebo or something, because I guess placebo is a very real thing. So, and so a lot we could talk about in there in the sciences. We talk about the science of like psychology and physiology and what's happening. And I would love to know that, like have some tests going on about adrenaline levels and chemical releases and what's happening. And wouldn't it be great if we could...
too much to know in the world. There's too much we don't know.
And I don't want to know everything. I just want to know all the stuff that I want to know. Like there's a lot of stuff I don't want to know. I just want to know everything about all the stuff that I don't know. Like outer space astrophysicist Paul Wallace. And we should remind people that not only are you a podcast host here most every other Friday, but you're a professor at St. Agnes College and
Agnes Scott.
Agnes Scott.
Yeah, she's kind of a saint around here, but
is there a St. Agnes College? Is there a St. Agnes College?
They're not that I know of, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, there is in my brain. I think I say that. I think I say it wrong every time. You'd think, with my little sticky notes right here, I would put one right in front of me that says Agnes Scott College, a women's university.
Right.
So you're teaching people, and then you're also a working pastor working in a church. So you've got lots of angles on this. And Paul, we were talking a bit about. Texting a bit about all the stories going on with the sky right now and going on up in the sky. Turns out the billionaires are really one-upping one another.
It's like a big pissing contest.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, like moving to the more private partnerships with NASA and all. And now it's stirred up that I guess Virgin Galactic is in the game. And that's a guy named Branson. Is that right? He's now decided that if Bezos is going to be going up on a route, he's going to go up. He's not going to get beat out by Jeff Bezos. So
and Bezos won't get beat out by Elon. I mean, there's three of them. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pull you into economic theory here on all this. Is this competition really good for space industry? This feels like the kind of thing we're going to look back on. Pick your year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now. Some tragedy is going to befall this whole project. People are going to be like, "Well, you know what actually caused that?" Like when the Challenger shuttle was destroyed in mid-flight. They've now gone back and realized that launching that day had a political rationale for it. Ronald Reagan really wanted it to go up, so NASA really worked hard to send it up on that day. That was where the problem came from. It wasn't quite right. So these kinds of backstories you find out some people find out at the time, but others find out years later. Boy, it feels like, 3 billionaire type guys that are all running their own space launching groups. And now they're very publicly competing with each other about who's going to go up, who's going to take the fanciest person with them, who's going to get up there first.
It's one of those double-edged swords. It does, in fact, drive, innovation, but it also creates a pressure, kind of in the same way sometimes that like the profit motive causes pressures, makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. It's the same kind of effect, I think. I do think that it can create problems as well, but it's undeniably also drives innovation. So, that's all I got, being not an economist.
Well, they're up to it. They're going up like all summer long, man. These people are flying other human beings who are not trained astronauts and others.
It does strike me as a little bit like just really, really rich boys is what boys who are, doing the same thing that we would have done in the backyard, competing somehow, bike racing, whatever.
Well, one of the people going up is this woman named Wally Funk, who is
by the way, we need to pause for a second to admire that name, Wally Funk.
And is a woman with the name Wally. I don't know if I'm more impressed with Wally or Funk. I mean,
the combination is undeniable.
Funkadelics. Yeah, it's just, how have I never heard of her? Like, I'm not a NASA person. I don't know, but it turns out
I never heard of her either, and I've done some NASA work, and I've never heard of her.
See, you know why? It's because she's a woman. I'm telling you, that's what's going on.
That's right.
So she's like 80-something, 84 years old, and Bezos has said she's the one that's going to get to go because she was a fighter pilot or something. And like he's trying to acknowledge the long history of people being excluded from flight. And so then you get, and granted, this is true and should happen, but boy, there's just a lot of other things going on these low Earth orbit rocket launch flight things. But we're talking about it now because Wally Funk is going. So you think, well, Jeff Bezos, nice, or whoever made that call, nice move.
So this is I didn't look closely. This is a low Earth orbit deal for the short term thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think they go up and they're up there for a while and then they come right back down. I heard a radio story about this with an interview with her about what's it going to feel like when you go up into sort of low Earth orbit and then there's some phrase about gravity that they used in it. You're in a zero. Would it be full zero gravity?
Yeah. If you're in low Earth orbit, you're in zero gravity. Yeah. Doesn't matter how close to the Earth you are. If you're orbiting the Earth, truly orbiting the Earth, you're in zero gravity.
You're in zero gravity. Okay, so again, be gentle with me here. How does the spacecraft stay in the Earth's orbit if it's in zero gravity? Isn't gravity that which is keeping it close to the Earth?
Yes, it is an irony. So imagine you've got
irony.
Let me see.
That's what you love in space flight, the irony. That's the part. That's what the philosophers are supposed to tell you, not the astrophysicists.
This is my D cup. You can make up your own jokes.
Okay, you have a coffee cup in your hand for those in the podcast with a giant D on it.
Stands for Dad. Okay.
Does it? Does it though?
So those who are just listening can't see this, but basically imagine I'm trying to get this oriented. The camera flips the picture, so it's a little.
Okay.
So anyway, you got the circle. So so here is the satellite, whatever, or the rocket ship, right? Okay. It's moving forward, but it's also falling towards the Earth, right? Because the Earth is pulling it towards the Earth, but it's moving forward at just the right speed. But the Earth is curving out from under it continuously, so it's always in free fall. It's always falling. Okay. It's always falling that way, but also moving that way. So you combine that motion, and you get that motion.
And they balance each other out, and that's what creates the zero gravity.
Yeah. So you're always falling. You're always if you're in low Earth orbit, you're always falling towards the Earth, but the Earth is also curving out from in front of you fast enough to where you never hit the ground.
It's like a Richard Rohr thing here that we're falling forward. Okay, so this thing that's a book they wrote about, failing forward. So you're falling forward. How high does this space rocket? No, I've gotten the words wrong. How high does this vehicle have to go before it's falling and
it depends on
moving forward?
It depends on the speed. The lower you are, the faster you have to go to avoid.
So you can get to zero gravity by going faster, and you're doing that with your propeller. Your propellant.
You could have an object orbiting. If the Earth were a perfect sphere, you could have an object orbiting the Earth that was only an inch above the surface, if it was going fast enough.
Oh, that's awesome. It would run into a lot of things, but that's still pretty cool.
Right. But if Earth were a perfect sphere, you wouldn't run into anything. So if you threw a rock fast enough, and you could ignore like air resistance, you wait about, maybe 45 minutes and it would come back around from the opposite direction because it would orbit the Earth.
We just got to sit with that for a second. If you throw a rock fast enough, you wait about
forget about air resistance.
Yeah. Okay. So imagining
maybe an hour. I don't know what the number is. Something like that. Maybe an hour.
To travel around so if you're going fast enough to not be affected by gravity, you can make a trip around this sphere.
Well, you're affected by gravity, but the Earth is curving out from underneath. As it falls, the Earth is.
Oh, you're assuming the Earth is not flat in this story that you're telling us.
I am assuming the Earth is not flat.
All right. Well, that's good.
Which I know is a big leap for a lot of people.
Yeah. We've been talking about this for years. There's now some new documentary out about the flat earthers that people are super into. And I'm afraid it's just going to recruit a lot of people into it because they're a fascinating group of people. And all of this, are all of these vehicles that are going up? Because the word rocket means that which propels you up. But the thing you're in is not called a rocket, right? It's called just a spacecraft?
I don't know what you would call it. Different. I don't know what the name would be. But no, the rocket itself is the thing that boosts you up into the orbit. But then it typically falls off. And if you're Elon Musk, you make those rockets land back on these floating docks out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They're going to do one of those next week.
Cool.
So it's going to come back. How far? And so don't tell me miles because I lose perspective. Between the Earth and the Moon, what percentage of, how far between the Earth and the Moon are you when you can be in this little zero gravity? Is it like a third away?
Well, again, the zero gravity doesn't depend on how high you are, but what we call low Earth orbit.
Okay.
It's got to be 1/1000th.
Wow,
maybe
1/1000th.
Maybe 1/500th the distance, and it's not even close to going to the moon. You're not even close.
See, this is why I think this is helpful for people, because it feels like all this rockety business and people shooting things up and flying up there and Branson and Elon Musk and Bezos.
Yeah.
In people's minds, saying people like me, apparently, maybe I'm the only one, it can feel like, this is like what Neil Armstrong did, but now we're just doing this all the time. This is making me think, no.
They
went 500 times further and was a really big deal in 1969 to accomplish
This is not nearly the same. I'm trying to figure out what the...
Wow.
You're 1,200 miles or less above the surface of the Earth, basically, in low Earth orbit.
Okay, and I told you not to say miles, but now I need it. Yeah. How far is it? How many miles is it to the moon, Alice?
Couple hundred thousand.
Couple 100,000. All right. So this, not to take anything away from the accomplishment of all this. This is all important, but it's really not anywhere close to the travel distance. So when we see all these reports, like things go up, they come back down. We reuse them. Boy, we've really solved the problem. Yeah. We're talking about totally different scales here.
Yeah. And going to the moon is nowhere close to the scale of going to Mars. Nowhere close.
And we keep hearing, and we've said it here on our conversations, that part of the value of all this is it ultimately can get us to Mars. So really? Like
to get to the moon requires a few days. To get to Mars would require months.
And to get up to where these things are going to go requires a
couple hours, if that long. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, two other things that popped up in the news that captured me. One of them is about Venus, and partly I heard another podcast about Venus, and it blew my mind. And I thought Paul and I need to do an entire thing on Venus. I don't know if you're.
We do actually. I'd be pleased to do that.
Venus blows my mind. One of the, and I've got those like multiple Venus songs from the 1970s running through my head, so I gotta clear those out. I'll be your Venus. Now, other people listening who know those songs also, sorry about that. They might be running through
including me.
I heard that our moon may have been a Venus moon and the Earth stole it with our gravitational pull.
I have never heard that before. I've never heard that before. Jeez, and I got to tell you, Doug,
you've heard a lot of things about Venus, and that's not true.
Yeah,
because I've been telling people. Well, I've been telling people this. I heard it on a podcast, and I'll tell you, I'm just like I'm like the shepherd out announcing the birth of the Christ child, telling people this.
Whether it's true or not,
I need to stop this.
Whether it's true or not, it just seems to me to be highly unlikely, just really improbable.
Okay, Venus doesn't have moons.
No moons. Not a one. Neither does Mercury.
You know why? Because we stole it. Because the Earth stole it.
Because we stole it.
I don't know if you've heard this. Okay,
I need to research this theory because I do know one thing that's really interesting is that the origin of the moon has been hotly debated for a long time. We've more or less landed on a consensus, but it sounds like there might be a new player. That is not one of the theories that I normally teach my students.
Well, don't start until we find out something more than.
More research is indicated.
Doug may have heard this on a podcast or may have gotten it wrong.
But I heard it on YouTube. Yeah.
I did. But I also learned about my own, swimming panic attacks. So, YouTube's serving me pretty well right now. All right. So what's fascinating about Venus for you, and why have we kept looking at it, and why are they now saying, hey, not so fast. Life on Venus isn't as possible as we thought that it was.
Yeah.
Was that a thing that something we would call complex life could be existing on Venus?
Well, there was a thought that life could exist there in the atmosphere, but probably not so much on the surface because it's very dry. I mean, Venus is extremely dry, extremely hot, hot enough to melt lead. You take a block of lead and put it on Venus's surface, it'll melt. It just won't last. 700-800 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that.
Okay.
But there was thought that maybe in the atmosphere there was enough water still. But it looks like the amount of water in the atmosphere of Venus is simply way below the threshold of what we think would be required for life as we know it.
As we know.
If there is life there, it's life, as the article says, if there is life there, it is life as we do not know it.
Which seems like a great out for all these things. Like, there's life, but just we don't know it. We can't see it.
We just don't. Yeah, it's not as we know it.
We wouldn't call it life.
Yeah.
Is it true that Venus has like a 1,000,000-year-long storm going on the planet? Like there's been a long forming, continuous, raging storm.
It definitely has weather, but I've not heard of a storm lasting that long, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were.
What is it that captures your imagination about this little Venus?
Well, it's number one thing you need to know about it is that it can cast shadows. You can have Venus shadows. If you have a dark sky and only Venus is up, the moon's not up, you can get shadows from it. It's by far the brightest thing in our sky other than the sun and the moon, by far. About 9 times out of 10 when somebody says to me, hey, Paul, I was looking west or east and I saw this really bright thing right before sunrise or right after sunset, it's Venus because it's so brilliant. It is extremely hot. Its atmosphere is very thick and it's almost entirely CO2. So it's got what we call a runaway greenhouse effect. That's why it's so hot. It traps heat. Like if you park your car, it's really cold, but you park your car in the sun.
Yeah.
And then you get in the car later on, and it's nice and warm in there. That's just the greenhouse effect. Basically, Venus, the CO2 in the atmosphere does on a huge scale what the little bit of CO2 in our atmosphere does for us, which is make the planet warmer. And that's one of the things that's causing global warming, of course, is the CO2 in our atmosphere is going up, and it doesn't require much of a change to get a dramatic effect. Wow. So Venus's atmosphere is 90 times heavier than ours, 90 times more dense than ours, and it's like 96% CO2. That's
how do we know that? How do we know what the makeup of the?
We've been there.
Who?
In fact, the Russian turns out the Russians were the first there, and the first probe. Little known fact here. I might have mentioned it on the show before. I can't remember, but amazing little fact. The first planet that we ever landed on, besides the Earth, was Venus.
Besides the Earth.
Back in 1970.
We landed a probe.
The Russians did. The communists did it.
Why are they not?
Back when they were the CCCP.
Why are they not bragging about that all the time, or are they? Seems like, Putin would come out and be like, "Hey, by the way, we landed on Venus." What did they land on Venus back in the 70s? What did they?
A little probe called Venera. It was called Venera. Venera 9, I think, was the first one to land.
And it didn't just burn up because it's 700
It only
degrees.
lasted about like an hour or less, but there was enough. We got the first photograph ever taken of another planet's surface was Venus, and it was sent by Venera 9.
Wow.
And we've also had plenty of we've had orbiting spacecraft determine its temperature and so forth. We can determining the temperature of the atmosphere is not hard.
Well, if you're there, yeah. I just didn't know we had something rolling around. How far away is Venus? Like in Moon Mars.
The closest it gets to us is about 30 million miles. The closest it gets to us is about 30 million miles.
30 million miles.
Right. But miles, it's hard to understand what that means. Like you said before.
Right.
It's a long way.
It's a long way. How long did how long did it take for that 1972 communist spacecraft?
Probably several months. I'm guessing 6 months. 6 to 8 months.
I'm not down talking, the ability of people to put their engineering together in the 1970s. But that's an incredible feat to figure out the math that's because once that rocket shoots that vehicle, it's just got to stay on one path back then, right? Or were they able to?
No, you can control. It's got little boosters. You can reorient it and redirect it. That doesn't require a whole lot of energy, surprisingly, to do that.
And the communication was enough 27 million miles away.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can't get cell service in my basement. It's just this is what makes people think none of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a delay of a few minutes,
Sure.
But yeah,
I would take that in my basement with my cell service. All right, so we've been to Venus, and then did the good old capitalists land any probes on Venus, or are we just living off of the?
Nope, we never have. But apparently, we're looking towards doing that. Although I don't think these new ones are going to be landers exactly. I think we learned pretty quickly that landing on Venus is hazardous because of not only is it very hot, but there's also sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, which tends to corrode, of course, things very, very quickly. It's not a hospitable environment, I tell you.
Yeah, for spacecraft as we know it. We can
as we know it.
Create a spacecraft that we don't know. Well, I want to know more about Venus. It is obviously it's been in the human consciousness as long as humans have been around, like you say, because you can see it in the sky. So people have been wondering about it, and obviously its own name, and its play in the mythical narratives of humans all over, in societies all over the world, have held to the thing, and. There's a lot of rumors about it, of course, that may not be true about its moon situation, the big moon controversy.
It could be true. I ain't saying it's not true.
But we should, yeah. Do you think anybody listening is like, I think Paul probably isn't right about that. I bet Doug's probably right about that.
Before we leave Venus, you got to also know that it rotates backwards.
Compared to every other planet, by who's... Oh,
like if you get up above the sun and the sun is the sun rotates counterclockwise, say, above the North Pole of the sun. All the other planets orbit in the same direction counterclockwise, and they also rotate counterclockwise.
So they're all part of the same drivetrain,
except for Venus. Venus rotates the opposite direction, clockwise in this.
So it orbits in one direction and
orbits in the same direction as all the other planets, but it rotates in the opposite direction. So if it orbits counterclockwise, it rotates clockwise.
Wow. What do you think that's about? Some big molten shift like we're going to have on this planet when the polar things shift and everything breaks?
The theory is that it was caused by some huge collision with another, because the early solar system was really messy. There were rocks flying everywhere, and it was probably the cause of a collision with another. Or maybe it flung the moon out.
I was going to say, do you think that's when it lost its moon?
Sure.
You think the big Venus collision is when it lost its moon?
That's it.
Like the hubcap went flying off the Venus car.
Yeah. And got caught by
hanging on someone's wall. Yeah. So it rotates. I mean, it's just a lot of things. Did we know this about the rotation before the communists sent the probe up there?
Yeah,
or was that all discovered
long before that? Yeah. Radar bouncing light off of it, radio waves off of it. We were able to tell quite a long time before that.
Feels like we learned a lot from the 1950s to the mid 70s about Venus. Have we continued to learn a lot about it, or are we basically working off? We know a lot more about its terrain. We've got some really nice detailed maps of its terrain and so forth. But it does remain because we're flying something around it. There's cameras flying around it now, taking pictures.
Yeah.
Through the storms.
Yeah. I mean, the entire planet. Yeah, like think of the weather on Earth and think of a day that is completely overcast, solid overcast all day long. Every place on Earth, on Venus is like that. It is solid clouds over the whole planet all the time. That's why it's so reflective. That's why it's so bright. The surface of Venus is quite a bit darker, but what we're seeing when we see it with our eyes is the reflection of sunlight off the tops of these clouds.
Okay, and bright. now back to my water fetish here. Yeah. All of those clouds is water. It's like our clouds, or are these clouds made of something else?
Partially water. I think there are sulfuric acid clouds, but I think a lot of what we see, yes, is water.
Is water.
Yes.
So on the Earth, the water, we're in this cycle where the water's up in the air and then down in the ground and then evaporates and goes back up, and it's this convection or whatever. But there's this system rolling. Yeah. Is that happening on Venus too? Does it have that kind of flow?
No, there's no rain. There's no rain whatsoever. There's no liquid.
It's just floating water that never falls.
Yeah, I need to actually put an asterisk by that. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what the clouds are composed of. I do know that this atmosphere is mostly CO2,
and they're just sitting. It's just sitting there. It's just rotating around or spinning. Or is there wind? I mean, is there wind?
It's moving around. Yes, I mean there's going to be what we call convection, which is basically what wind is. But it probably can get quite fast. But there are no real seasons on Venus. Because it's, the Earth has that tilt to it. You see, when you go by a globe, it's got a little tilt to the Earth's axis.
Yes.
Venus is essentially straight up and down. So there's just not much as far as seasons go. But there is weather because
I'm just pausing for a minute because now I'm remembering that the reason we have seasons is because of the tilt of the Earth on its axis, and that's what causes winter, spring, summer, and fall.
Right. But the temperature doesn't vary that much.
Yeah.
The temperature doesn't vary that much between day and night because of the atmosphere. It moderates the temperature a lot.
Well, Venus.
It's a crazy place, man.
Little sweetie. Hey, this.
What we gotta do? We gotta do like a planet. We gotta do like the planet of the week is, and spend the day talking about
Yes,
Neptune.
we should. A planet tour.
That's it. Yeah. We should do that. That'd be cool.
Like children, we all like to say we don't have a favorite, but we know that's
I have a favorite.
do. Do you have a favorite planet?
Oh yeah.
Venus?
No, it's Saturn. Saturn
Really?
for sure. Absolutely.
Did Saturn lose its moon? Is that the
No,
okay?
no. Saturn's got like 70 moons or something, maybe even close to
Saturn's
80.
got the ring, right? The rings
Got the
around it.
rings, yeah, and the moons, yeah,
Why?
yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Why is
And,
that your favorite? What turns you on about the rings?
uh, well, number one is
The
the
hula
rings.
hoop
I mean,
craze of the '70s.
I'm still a kid at heart in a lot of ways, and quite frankly, a great deal of the appeal is the rings. It makes the images that come back from Saturn are so dramatic and so unbelievable, just beautiful. Just the beauty of it
Wow.
just kills me. But the planet itself is pretty interesting for a number of reasons, and the moons of Saturn are just loopy.
Boy, there's a band name for you. The Moons of Saturn. Is that not a group?
Yeah.
That should be a jazz. That should be your jazz band. You know, when you put together that jazz band of yours, it's going to be the Moons of Saturn. That's awesome. All right, so let's do that. Let's do a roundup of the planets. We can do the debate about Pluto, I guess, later, if it fits our list or not.
Maybe we could do like Pluto and talk about the dwarf planets and use Pluto as our starting point for the dwarf.
Are there
There's
more?
Five dwarf planets. Yep.
Are they brand name, or are they just all thrown into the category of dwarf planets?
What do you mean brand name?
Like,
you mean do they have cool names?
Yeah, that people know, or is Pluto the only one?
No. Eris and Maki Maki and Ceres, yeah, and Haumea, all these great names. So
never heard of any of those. Yeah, okay,
exactly, but they're lovely.
So this is what astrophysicists and sky dwellers and stuff all know about all those, and lots of other people haven't yet heard of those. I thought it was just like some big argument whether Pluto was a planet because the planet designation was so massive, but there's like a subset of dwarf planets that we don't even.
When Pluto was demoted, we invented a category called dwarf planets.
Oh, what did we call those before before Pluto was punished? And
minor. They belonged in a more general category called minor planets. It's like the taxonomy is really bizarre. So
it's old. Like it's old. It's from, and they try to keep the taxonomy in place and then fix it as they go. Is it like that?
And so you sort of end up adding layers. Basically, there's still minor planets, and there's also dwarf planets, and some dwarf planets are also minor planets, and so it gets kind of crazy. And there's more categories too, which I'll spare you at this moment. But
not when we get into the planet our
That's
planet
right.
tour. We're going to go deep into the subtext because I think it's so interesting. Just as a separate note, that so many areas of study have a locked-in taxonomy, and then nobody wants to really tip over all of those apples off that cart, so they just start making little adjustments to it. Right. Like this is true. It's true in all the sciences, certainly true in religion, right? Like that's one of the, you call those doctrines, and then you just start fussing with them as you go.
Right.
Because you're like, well, that doesn't really describe anything but let's just leave it there, and then we'll make some hybrid of it later. That is so common. And I think it's part of what makes so deeply knowing every, or all the different, areas of study difficult, right? Because there's all these little split offs, and the more expert you become, the more you can navigate all of those splits. It's what separates those who know stuff from people who don't.
That's what I tell my students. Go on.
No, you go.
So that's what I tell my students when we start class. I just did my welcome. I'm teaching an astro class right now, and I just made a welcome to class video. And I basically told them that, they probably learned about the solar system back in 4th grade or whatever, And I think the group I'm teaching now might be the first group to never have been taught there were 9 planets. Because the switch happened in 2006. The demotion, the change from 9 to 8 planets occurred in August of 2006. And my students are 20, which means they were born, rough average of 20 years old. They were born in 99 or 2000.
Wow.
And so they were, by the time, they might have been taught in like preschool or kindergarten that there were 9 planets. But by the time they got to where they were really conscious of what was going on around them, they were taught there were 8. So, but I tell them there's more. I tell them there's more than 8 planets. I mean, there's so much more to talk about in the solar system than just the 8 planets.
Yeah, like that would be this great question, right? How many of you believe there are 8 planets? How many of you believe there are 9 planets? How many of you believe there are more than 9 planets? People wouldn't even know how to answer that question.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, is it 8 or is it 9? And then there's other
the
ones.
Truth is,
why do we have 8 and 9 if there's a bunch of other ones? Then why do we even have these numbers?
The truth is the word planet was never defined until 2006.
That's what got Pluto demoted, was that we finally defined what makes a planet a planet?
We set a definition that excluded Pluto from planethood.
Do you think Pluto's saying things like, it depends on what the definition of planet is? Yeah. That's my Bill Clinton joke.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
I mean, I'm a planet if...
no, I think Pluto was cool with it. I think Pluto was always sort of the crazy uncle you keep in the attic, when nice people come over to visit. Pluto was always kind of the cantankerous outsider. And in that sense, I kind of miss Pluto for that reason. Yeah, emotionally, I was damaged by the decision. Scientifically, I agreed with it, but emotionally, I felt.
Yeah, like all the normative pretty planets, and then the one that's not like everyone else just gets kicked out because someone wants to reorganize. Boy, that sounds like stuff human beings do.
Exactly, curmudgeon. He was the curmudgeon of the planet family.
Okay, so just real quickly for people now who've got this going through their minds, what was it about Pluto that made it such a offbeat, Q planet?
Oh well. It didn't follow the general pattern, for one thing. We got, the first 4 planets are small and rocky.
Okay.
And then the next 4 planets are big and made of gas.
Gassy.
And then there's Pluto, which was super tiny and made of ice. Okay, so that's one thing.
Oh, okay. So you go rocks. So rocks and gas in.
Yeah. 4 rocks, 4 gas, and then 4 small rocks, 4 big gas, and then 1 super teeny tiny ice thing made of ice. Okay. So it broke that. It also its orbit is very elliptical, much more elliptical than any other planet. And also, if you looked at the orbit from the side, it was tilted quite a bit.
Okay. Well,
almost all the other 8 planets
let's not throw asteroids, by living on a tilted planet here. Okay, so people also on a tilted planet are like, but you're a little too tilted, Pluto.
Yeah. I mean, its orbit was tilted. So if you look at the solar system from the side, all the other planets orbit in the same plane, basically. Okay. But Pluto's orbit was tilted like 25 degrees relative to all the others.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What made people think it should be a planet long before they made this, firm definition?
It was the first thing we discovered beyond Neptune that orbited the sun. So there's an object that orbits the sun. The thought was in 1930 when it was discovered, there's a planet.
So not good enough that it orbits the sun, but is this true of all the dwarf planets? Like they just have quirky little features and orbiting. Yeah, I would have thought, if somebody had said to me, like, what makes a planet, I would have thought back to our conversations and probably thought, well, it has to orbit the sun as opposed to like orbiting something else, and can't just be sort of flying around like a comet or an asteroid. And so what things do we have up there that do that? It's not a star.
Comets and asteroids orbit the sun.
Oh, well, see, there we go. It's a good thing they didn't ask me to, define what a planet is. I do remember.
Maybe when we do our Pluto show, I can get it. I can make a quick. I can tell you what a planet's defined to be and tell you why Pluto's not one.
Oh, I think you should do one of those pop quizzes where there's like, I've got multiple choice answers and.
Okay. Yeah.
Me and the guests will have to answer these. Yeah. And you could be as, if it sounds smart,
fun.
It could be as ridiculous as you want it to be, because
that sounds fun.
I don't know. I remember like some jokes.
Like one of those Twitter quizzes, those Twitter surveys.
Totally.
Yeah.
There was some meme back in like, if God declared Pluto to be a planet, then I'm sticking with that kind of thing, that people they were up in arms about, like someone deciding that God's planet is not a planet, Pluto. Like, no, that's not how it works.
Though, I will say this too, that something else people in general don't know is that if you look back like over the last 400 years, 500 years, whatever, the number of planets that we thought the number of objects that we had called planets varies anywhere from 7 up to 12 or 13. There were a time when we thought where astronomers had thought there were 12 planets because they had labeled asteroids, the large asteroids, the first discovered asteroids back in the early 19th century. They thought, well, there's a planet, but that they didn't stay planets because it was discovered that they were just part of this huge, what we call asteroid belt with millions of other objects similar to them.
Wow. So there were then people who were big into that world. They went to their deathbed holding tight that these things no, there's not a whole lot of stuff out there. There's a few things we can see and define, and that's that. And boy, isn't that fascinating thinking about who those
and it's
people are.
The closer we've looked over the last 400 years, the more stuff we found. Just depends on how close you look.
But we're done with that, right? We now know what's out there, we know, and we're not going to get big surprises ever in the future about that space is different than we think it is, right? I was being.
I got it.
Now we know.
Ironical,
because we sent a probe into Venus.
Right, so we know everything there is to know about Venus now.
All right, so we only have a moment left, but there's one other news story that we texted about, and that's I saw 5 or 7 different stories about astronomers seeing a black hole swallowing a neutron star. And it was just all over the place. I looked at these stories. I can't figure out why that matters. But man, I mean, there's whole articles, and graphics and okay, so is this all because we don't know what a black hole is and we're just still really mad about the fact that we just call it a black hole because we don't know what it is?
Well,
or do we know what it is?
I think we. I mean, in one sense, we don't, but in another sense, we know one when we see one. There are certain properties that black holes have,
planets,
and we know one when we see one. I mean, there are very definite characteristics of a black hole that make them unlike anything else.
Sure.
And we know when we see them. But as far as what you would find if you went into one, and what is at the point we call the singularity, we don't know.
But it is near the singularity, isn't that true? Isn't that what Ray Kurzweil said?
That
is near. Okay, so what's the big thing about a black hole swallowing a neutron star?
It's cool, I guess.
What's a neutron star? I guess that's where I have to start.
Okay. A neutron star is basically the core. Well, I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you where it came from. A neutron star is basically an object roughly the size, I always tell my students, of Metro Atlanta, of what we have an interstate that goes around Atlanta we call it the perimeter, Interstate 285, about 10 miles in diameter, roughly. I'm sorry, in radius, 10 miles in radius, roughly. It's an object about that big, about 10 miles in radius, but which has approximately the mass of the sun. So it's extraordinarily dense object. Actually, it's between about the mass of the sun. Okay. So it's an extraordinarily dense object. The gravity on this thing is phenomenal. It defies.
It would suck every little planet, dwarf planet, and asteroid into it because it's gravity.
If it got close enough, but the surface of it has got to be perfectly smooth because if you went, you couldn't stand on it, you couldn't build a mountain on it, you couldn't do anything on it because the gravity would just completely flatten it. So it's an object about 10 miles in radius and about the mass of the sun.
How big is our sun? What's the radius of our sun?
Radius of our sun is about 100 times the radius of the Earth. So the volume of the sun is approximately the volume of the sun is approximately 1 million times that of the Earth. So we're talking about it's what scientists call nuclear densities, because an atomic nucleus, right, contains virtually all of the mass of an atom. And so the density
Oh
of,
yeah.
but it's super tiny, right? So the density of a neutron star is approximately the same as the density of a nucleus.
Wow. Are there a
Those,
lot of these neutron stars
yeah,
floating around out there?
yeah. I mean, we're not going to have one, crash into Earth anytime soon, or ever. But yeah, there are plenty of them are out there.
Okay. And so somehow a black hole, then, which is also something super dense that grabs the thing, is so massive it could suck in the thing that's that dense. Is that what makes this
Sure.
story?
Yeah, a
Is
black
that
hole is
why?
typically a black hole is more massive than one solar mass. Typically,
Oh,
it's above about 1.4. It's above that. Um,
wow.
no, I'm sorry. It's higher than that. It's at least between like 5 and 10 solar masses.
Wow.
But anyway, it's more massive, and yeah, it sucks it in.
Hmm.
And as it does so, the neutron star would be destroyed because it'd be shredded in the strong gravity by forces that we call tidal forces, TIDAL forces. Tidal forces would destroy the neutron star as it spiraled into the black hole. It would heat up and it radiates in all kinds of, basically we'd see visible light, infrared light, ultraviolet light. It would just radiate in all
So you
parts
probably
of the
see this
spectrum.
question coming because it's in my very limited repertoire. How do we know this about neutron stars, how dense they are, and how do we know what a tidal experience is in a black hole?
Well, the tidal forces come straight out of Newton's theory of gravity. Basically, the
Newtonian
closer
theory of gravity. So not Einsteinian, not quantum, like
it can be
old
understood in
timey
terms
apple
of
fell from the tree.
it could be understood in terms of Newtonian
Wow.
gravity
Okay.
very easily. Because basically, think of it this way: the closer you are to an object, the stronger it pulls on you
Right.
gravitationally, right? So if you've got an extended object like this pin here, if the point of the pin is closer to a very massive object than the back of the pin,
Yep.
the front of the pin feels a stronger force toward the object than the back of the pin does. So that actually stretches the object out. It
Okay.
stretches the pin out because the front of it's being pulled more strongly than the back of it is. So it actually stretches the object out. And this has been witnessed within the solar system. This effect of tidal forces destroying
Okay.
um, comets and so forth. So that would
But how do
destroy
we?
the
So how do we
neutron.
know how dense these neutron stars are? Like that's their effect on other things, or like what? How do we
Uh,
know anything about these stars that are
Couple of
originally?
things. One is how it affects other objects, but one of the big reasons we know it is we think that our theories of physics are correct. We have good reason to trust our theories of physics that govern this kind of object. Quantum mechanics, basically, um, governs the behavior of this object. And
Huh.
so the observations are consistent with the theory, basically, put it that way.
Wow.
There's a consistency between what we see and what we think should be there.
And what are we seeing in a neutron star when someone looks at this? What do observers of neutron stars see happening?
Typically, what you see any neutron star's gravity is so great that it's going to attract
Oh,
matter around it. Also, the neutron stars, all of them have to be spinning very fast.
okay.
And so what you get kind of like, if you take a ball of dough and you throw it up in the air like a pizza guy and he spins
Yeah.
it and it flattens out.
Okay. Yeah.
What happens is as this material falls into the spinning neutron star, it flattens out in a disk around the star and it spirals in. And
Wow.
this heated material spiraling in and striking the surface of that neutron star creates a very characteristic spectrum. I mean, if you take the light from that and
Oh,
spread it out, it makes very characteristic markers show up in that spectrum.
how about
And we
that?
see that. We see that. I don't know how many neutron stars we know of, but there's thousands of them that we've cataloged at this point.
So they're
At
seeing
least
this
hundreds.
light, and by seeing
Yeah.
that light, they're like, "What could create that light?" And then they do the
Yeah.
physics stuff, and like, "This is what would create that light," and that's what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And it's consistent with the theory. Our physical theories predict the same kind of
Wow.
spectrum.
Incredible.
Yep.
Well, Wallace, you're a great teacher.
Thanks, man.
Happy should have been Independence Day, but we'll hang on till
a couple more days.
I think remembering back, they couldn't get it signed in time, or someone couldn't show up. Like they had to bump it. But it tells us that our little history on this planet is super important and part of a larger story that's going on. Well, Paul, thank you so much. Great chat with you. We'll get launched on this. Tell me about a planet thing, and we won't start with Earth because this one's more confusing than all the others. We'll save that.
Sure is.
We'll save that for the end. All right. Thanks everybody. Hey friends, we'll see you on Monday, and happy Independence Day weekend, sort of.